Welcome to the Art Lady's Home. Today I'm going to share with you the glaze combination I'm using for this piece of garden stack. And this is the one that I covered first with 2 coats of the Amaco Flux Blossom. So that was the base. And my theory behind this is, or my idea behind this is, the flux is going to be a nice, beautiful, light pink background, and it'll have some movement, and it'll just be a nice base coat for the other glazes. And I found that if I use the Sunset Pink from my research on the internet on top of the Flux Blossom, it's going to lighten out the Sunset Pink, and it'll also give it a little bit of movement. So I painted the petals of this type of abstract flower with the Sunset Pink after I let the Flux Blossom dry for a couple days. Then what I'm doing now is I'm painting on some Mayco stroke and coats on top of the Flux Blossom. And from my research, now what I did was I mixed the Blue Isle with the Sun Kiss to give it this type of a limey green chartreuse color. And I think it might form a really cool contrast with that Sunset Pink. And my research, I found that if you use stroke and coats with some flux glazes, you get some breaking in the color. So I'm hoping that that might happen, so it won't just look so stark and solid of an opaque color with just stroke and coats, because that's what you'll get if you fire the stroke and coats, just this solid color, no break. But I did want to have more of that high fire type look to this. So the Flux Blossom underneath will help create some movement with those Mayco stroke and coats. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I'll show you how I started here. I started putting some thicker color on this edge so that when it's real thick, because I have 2 coats of Flux Blossom underneath, it'll start creating some running effects. So this color will start running down and it'll catch in these grooves. Now, toward the bottom, what I did, you can see where I left it raw clay, but I've also done it very thin here. So I stopped my thicker layers here because all of this is just going to drip down and I don't want to get it stuck on the kiln. The same thing with the chartreuse green. I did some thicker layers here. Now it's got some Flux Blossom underneath, and so it'll break the color. The color will actually break once fired and then start flowing down this channel. And so I know that it's going to all pool here, so I did very thin stroke and coats and then 2 thicker coats here. So we're crossing our fingers because every time we fire something, it's pot luck. Now, I did a lot of research to figure out what these color combinations are going to do, and I just hope it's going to work. Now, the Flux Blossom is going to be a very light pinkish color, almost white here, and then you've got the green coming down. And what I did was I put really thick globs of stroke and coat near the tops, and then I kind of did a very thin area here, so that hoping the rest of the green will follow the flow down. And so again, the thick globs here, and then of stroke and coat, and then it'll just run down. Now underneath is that 2 coats of Flux Blossom by Amaco. So that's going to help create the stroke and coat to run, because normally this glaze pretty much stays put. So the stroke and coat glazes are going to run a little bit anyways because it's in a high fire, or actually mid-rain fire, but we're going to create some movement, and that's what I wanted. I didn't want just that plain opaque stroke and coat color. I wanted a little bit of color layering and molting and then some movement. So I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen. Now all of this was done with a coat of the Coyote Sunset Pink, and I've done 1 coat so far, and I'm going to do 2 coats complete. Now when I do my 1 coat, I also coat a little bit on the rim of these, a little bit heavier. Now I'm going to go back, do another coat, and then do another rim of a little bit heavier color here. Now on the underside, I did leave a lot of this just the Flux Blossom. It's a little hard to see because the colors are so faint, but I did run a color around my edge. And I'll show you what this looks like once it's fired. But I wanted to show you the step before, and then I'll show you the step after. You can kind of see where there's a channel. There is a little channel carved in to the clay here where that stroke and coat's going to run down. This is kind of an experiment with me using the Mayco stroke and coats on top of the Flux Blossoms. And then, of course, using the Coyote Sunset Pink with Flux Blossom. I've seen the results of that, picking up images throughout the internet and on Pinterest. So I know it's going to be a nice, kind of a bright pink with a little bit of movement because of the Flux Blossom underneath. So that's what I'm hoping is going to happen. Of course, I should have done a test run or a test tile on this combination, but I'm in a class right now and we're ending soon and we just don't have time. So this is my kind of winging it, and I'm hoping it's going to come out good, and I'll show you the results. Well, here it is out of the kiln, and I wanted to show you what it looks like and how it turned out. And I am really excited. You can see how it goes right through because it's going to be on a garden stack. But I'm really excited about the colors. And I would have done a few things differently, and I'll tell you about that. But I'm surprised at how the Flux Blossom really changed that sunset pink. Took away the orangey color, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. I kind of wished it was a little bit more of the orangier color. Let me show you what it looks like without all that Flux Blossom. Now this is with a little bit of green underneath here, partial. But this would be almost the true, right in the middle here, sunset pink color. See how it's more of that orangier color. It's an orangier pink than what I would call Fairy Rose. Let me show you Fairy Rose. Here's Fairy Rose with some Flux Blossom. And there's actually the one in the background back here is a Fairy Rose with a little bit of Flux Blossom on top as well. Here's Fairy Rose here. So if you compare the two, you can see Fairy Rose, this is the pure color down here. And then the pure sunset pink. So Fairy Rose is a little bit more pinker, and this is more, it has more yellow in it, so it's more of the orangier color of the pink, sunset pink. But when I added the Flux Blossom with this, it turns it almost identical to this in the same family. This is a lot lighter here because I did 2 coats. But this was only 1 coat of Flux Blossom with the Fairy Rose. But it's in this color almost matches here. It takes away that orange color, the Flux Blossom, which I was really surprised at. I had to go back and even look in my notes because I couldn't believe that this was sunset pink. Here, I'll show you the close-ups here of what this stroke and coats. And the stroke and coats really look great with this Flux Blossom. And this was a yellow-green stroke and coat. I mixed a little bit of yellow, I think it was a dandelion yellow, with some turquoise to make this yellow-green color, this bright yellow-green color. And then I did put some just yellow here just to see what's going to happen. And lots of flux. Again, if you look back to the beginning of the video, it explains how I did this. But really pretty, the way the white broke on top and molted kind of, and came to the top of the surface, the flux blossom, and then how it dripped into these crevices that I had carved. So really pretty marbling going down the side. So I was happy with that. And I wanted it to be a nice, beautiful pale color. In the center here, this is that Stroke and Coat thick right here. I love the way it pools and puddles down here. But I was really shocked at the color of this. It turned it more pink. I was expecting more of a lighter orange, or the lighter version of this. And then the way it came down in here, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was hoping it would do, and it did it. So my prediction was pretty spot on here. And this pot, I had no sticking to the kiln at all. I left it about, this is about a 1/2 inch here, which I kind of like the way it filters into the white going down. It goes, you know, thicker, and then this thin color. I really like it when it's the thin color, the brighter. And the pooling in these ridges came out really nice. The thick pooling. And the undersides had mainly just the flux blossom. And what I don't like on cups and mugs, and I've seen a lot of people, they do it this way, or it ends up this way. I don't like the really thick globs where it's actually raised way up. And I don't have a lot of that here. This is pretty much smooth with just a little bit of a bump. But when there's a little big glob here, I don't like that. I think it just looks messy on a mug or a piece of pottery. Of course, this is just for the garden, so little things like that don't matter. But the coloring came out really nice. I'm really surprised at this. And very pleased. Very, very pleased. But I'm surprised at this color. I was expecting this sunset pink to be more of that family. But it's still very pretty. It's a light piece. And this is the little bright highlight of the bud. Of course, this is an abstract flower. So that's what I envisioned this to be, that brighter bud of the bottom with some color and then the petals coming out. And then because it's a garden stack, that's why I made this other piece here as part of the inside of the flower. Almost like a poppy has that big intersection inside the flower. So that when the second piece of stack can come on, it's raised up above this delicate, these little delicate guys here, these curls of pistils and stamens. And they are very delicate. Actually, one even broke off while I was making it, you know, in the glazing part of it. Or at one stage, I can't remember when it broke off. But I just left it, you know, it's a piece for the garden, so little mistakes aren't gonna matter much. But there it is, and these colors really look good together. And they match, and the theme for the garden stack is these bright colors with the pinks, and I wanted it to be somewhat muted so that it's not just colors screaming at you, but then little bits of brightness coming through, and this really achieved it. And this is very similar. This color I mixed Stroke and Coats, and I mixed the color, and when you mix it, you can see it's pretty much true to color. And I wanted it to be very bright, so heavier, you know, obviously on the yellow. And it came out really nice. So I'm very, very pleased with that. But these colors together, I think, are really pretty. Now, I do want to show you this. I used the sunset pink, and I put some of that bright green underneath, and it has some interesting effects. I think I will experiment more with this. But this is one of the pieces I did not like. I didn't even use this on my totem or my garden stack, but it's going to go in the garden somewhere. But this is the dipping green here. Studio dipping green, and it's similar with that sunset pink on top here. And what's underneath is some studio dipping green. And then I wiped most of it down. There was actually some oatmeal on here too. And I wiped most of it off. And then I did pure sunset pink, which is a nice brighter color. You can see here it's very similar. Where the Flux Blossom did not touch, because I didn't want the Flux Blossom coming down here because I was afraid of it dripping and pooling into the kiln. And this was a kiln, it was a community kiln, so I didn't want to be responsible for getting this all over their kiln. So I wiped off a lot of the bottom, did this half real thin with glaze, and I love the effect. Because then you get the different values. You go from the dark and bright bud or base of the flower to the lighter petals as it opens. So the effect was really pretty. But I hope you learned a little bit about these colors. This is just crazy, the difference. Way crazy. Here's some more of this Fairy Rose. And this looks just like these two. So with Coyote's Fairy Rose, if you use your Flex Blossom, or the Sunset Pink actually, if you use Flux Blossom with Sunset Pink, you're going to get Fairy Rose. The almost same color as Fairy Rose. Because to me, that looks identical. These two. There's your Sunset Pink. So if you were limited on purchasing glazes, if you ordered Sunset Pink alone, you're going to get this color. And if you want Fairy Rose, you can order Flux Blossom, and then you've got Sunset Pink, and you can get one that's similar to a Fairy Rose when you add Flux Blossom to it, because this is Fairy Rose and Flux Blossom. This is Fairy Rose on the back by itself. Right there. One coat, or very thin. And then this is thicker, just Fairy Rose. And then this is the tip, is Fairy Rose and Flux Blossom, which is what's inside. And it's very similar to this. I'll show you the two here. So that's more orangey, that's more pink. But anyways, I hope you learned a little bit about these colors, and if you're going to be using them, this is Mayco Stroke and Coats. 2 coats. I do a lot of 2 coat because I don't want the glaze all running crazy. I'll show you some black Stroke and Coat. And this was Cone 5, I wanted to mention. And you can see the black is a little jumpy. And I hope you learned a little bit about the glaze combinations using Mayco Stroke and Coats and Coyote Sunset Pink and Coyote Fairy Rose and Amaco's Flux Blossom.